Here's a shocking reality that most people don't want to face. Bangladesh is about to spend a staggering TK 20,000 crore of taxpayer money to rescue banks that were systematically looted by corrupt borrowers and their political allies. Fahmida Khatun, who serves as the executive director of the Center for Policy Dialogue (CPD) and sits on Bangladesh Bank's board of directors, isn't mincing words about the government's controversial plan to merge 5 troubled Islamic financial institutions. These banks, First Security Islami Bank, Global Islami Bank, Union Bank, Social Islami Bank, and Exim Bank, are all struggling under the weight of bad loans and mismanagement. In an exclusive conversation with the Business Standard, Fahmida delivered a stark warning that has left many questioning whether this bailout is actually a reward for corruption disguised as economic necessity. But here's where it gets controversial. Should ordinary citizens foot the bill for banks that were deliberately destroyed by powerful elites? The government argues this massive bailout is essential to prevent what economists call a systemic collapse, essentially a domino effect, where failing banks could trigger widespread panic among ordinary depositors, devastate businesses, and leave thousands of employees jobless overnight. Think of it like preventing a house of cards from tumbling down and taking the entire neighborhood with it. However, Fahmida points out the elephant in the room that most officials prefer to ignore. This creates what's known as a moral hazard. In simple terms, it's like rewarding a reckless driver by buying them a new car after they crash the old one. The money being used to clean up this financial mess comes directly from hard-working taxpayers who had nothing to do with creating the problem in the first place. This is precisely why the government must implement ironclad accountability measures for any bank that receives this bailout support, Fahmida emphasizes. But here's the million-dollar question. Can we really trust the same system that allowed this corruption to flourish in the first place, to suddenly become a watchdog? And this is the part most people miss. The success of this entire merger framework hinges on something that has been virtually non-existent in Bangladesh's banking sector: truly independent, professionally qualified directors who can't be bought or influenced by political connections. Fahmida doesn't pull any punches when discussing how Bangladesh Bank, the country's central banking authority, has historically operated. A truly robust and independent Bangladesh bank must guarantee that bank boards cannot be hijacked by politically connected business groups and individuals, which has been the unfortunate norm until now, she states bluntly. The harsh reality is that Bangladesh Bank has previously been so compromised by political and business interests that it essentially became a passive observer while loans were approved and repeatedly rescheduled, completely disregarding established banking protocols and regulations. But here's where the controversy deepens. Is it even possible to revive these banks without completely overhauling Bangladesh Bank itself? Fahmida's answer is unequivocally clear. Attempting to revive banks without fundamentally reforming the governance structure and operational capacity of Bangladesh Bank is an exercise in futility. She argues that the reform measures currently being proposed by Bangladesh Bank to restore the banking sector's health can only succeed if there's a genuinely strong central bank backing them up. The brutal truth: revival becomes impossible unless the regulatory authority itself is completely liberated from political interference and manipulation. Now comes the financial reality check that should concern every citizen. Can Bangladesh really afford to spend TK 20,000 crore when the country is already facing severe fiscal constraints? The numbers paint a sobering picture. Bangladesh's current fiscal space is extremely limited, with the tax-to-GDP ratio hitting only 7.4% in the previous fiscal year. To put this in perspective, this level of revenue generation is woefully inadequate to fund the country's critical development priorities, including healthcare, education, social safety net programs, and climate adaptation initiatives. Allocating such a massive sum to bank bailouts means the government will be forced to dramatically restructure its spending priorities. Fahmida warns that this reallocation must not come at the expense of depriving essential sectors that directly impact citizens' daily lives. Moreover, she insists that the government must provide concrete assurances to citizens that this injection of funds into weak banks will be a one-time recapitalization effort, not the beginning of an endless cycle of bailouts. But here's the truly controversial part that should make every citizen angry. This isn't the first time such recapitalizations have occurred, and historically, they've been repeated multiple times without producing any meaningful results. Fahmida forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The government must seriously consider the opportunity cost involved here. The country is essentially sacrificing social infrastructure and other critical necessities to clean up banks that were systematically looted with complete impunity, without strict accountability measures and consequences for those responsible. This recapitalization of weak banks will simply reward corruption and perpetuate the same cycle of mismanagement that created this crisis in the first place. So here's the question that demands an answer. Are we witnessing genuine financial reform, or are we about to watch the biggest taxpayer-funded reward for corruption in Bangladesh's banking history? What do you think? Should taxpayers be forced to bail out banks that were deliberately destroyed by corrupt borrowers and their political protectors? Or is this bailout the only way to prevent an even bigger economic disaster? Share your thoughts, because this decision will impact every single citizen's financial future, whether they realize it or not.